Hello, and welcome back to Sleepy Silent. If you're here, maybe you're one of those people who can't fall asleep at night, whose mind gets even busier once the lights go out, who lies in bed, listening to their own breathing, wishing someone would just talk, slowly, without rushing, until sleep finally arrives. So tonight, we're going to take a journey together. Not a journey about war, not about treasure, not about some mystery that will frighten you. Tonight, we're going to talk about something very small, something so ordinary, so everyday, that you and I do it without even thinking, every single morning and every single night. Cleaning our teeth. That's all. But as we move further into this journey, you'll see that this small thing isn't so small after all. Thousands of years ago, before toothpaste, before toothbrushes, before dentists, before fluoride, how did people clean their teeth? The answer will surprise you. Sometimes it will feel strange, and sometimes you'll smile quietly to yourself, grateful to have been born in this century. But don't worry, this isn't a scary story. It's just a slow, long, peaceful voyage from the deserts of Egypt through the streets of Rome, the temples of China, the forests of India, all the way to the small, ordinary people of the ancient world who taught us what cleanliness even means. You don't need to do anything. Close your eyes if you'd like, or keep them open, whatever feels right. Just listen. Let my voice fill your room like a soft light slowly dimming. Remember, this channel is called Sleepy Silent, and our only goal is this, to give you such deep, such peaceful sleep that when you wake up tomorrow, you won't even remember where the story ended. So take a slow, deep breath, and let's travel back, far, far back in time, to the moment when a human being first put a finger in their mouth and thought, "What is this stuck between my teeth?" Let's start right from the beginning, millions of years ago. Back then, there were no cities, no houses, and in many places, not even fire had been discovered yet. People lived in forests, slept in caves, and ate whatever they could find. Sometimes raw meat, sometimes roots, sometimes fruit, sometimes tough, fibrous. And when they ate, things got stuck in their teeth. Exactly the same way it happens to us today. But they had no toothpicks, no toothbrushes. So what did they do? Scientists, studying the fossilized jaws and teeth of very ancient humans in museums, found something quite fascinating. On those ancient teeth, there were faint, thin, straight grooves, as if someone had scraped something out from between them over and over again. Which means even millions of years ago, our ancestors were trying to remove things stuck between their teeth. How? Perhaps with a thin twig, perhaps with a blade of grass, perhaps with a thin sliver of animal bone. Just imagine a human being millions of years ago, sitting in the sun, reaching into their own mouth, using a small stick to pull out a piece of trapped meat from between their teeth. No mirror, no one to tell them if they were doing it right or wrong, just their own experience, that once the thing came out, their mouth felt lighter. This was, perhaps, the world's very first form of dental hygiene, the earliest way of cleaning teeth. No paste, no soap, just a thin twig and patience. And this method was so simple, so easy, that it lasted for thousands and thousands of years. Humans spread out of Africa across the entire world, and wherever they went, they carried this small habit with them, picking at their teeth with a thin stick or twig. Isn't that remarkable? Even today, in many parts of the world, people still use methods very similar to this. But we'll come to that a little later. For now, just think about that very first human being who felt discomfort in their teeth for the first time and used their own intelligence and whatever was around them to find a solution. This is human nature, solving problems. Whether it's lighting a fire, shaping a stone tool, or simply removing something stuck between your teeth. Slowly, generation after generation, this small habit was passed down, without anyone ever writing it into a book, without anyone ever calling it a science. It was simply something people did, quietly, patiently, the way we still quietly, patiently brush our teeth today without giving it a second thought. Think, for a moment, about how long this simple habit lasted before anyone thought to change it. Tens of thousands of years passed. Ice ages came and went. Entire species of early humans rose and disappeared. And through all of that slow, vast stretch of time, this one small gesture remained almost exactly the same. A thin stick, a patient hand, a small moment of relief after a meal. There is something very calming about that thought, isn't there? That some things, even very small things, can stay so quietly consistent while everything else around them changes completely. And slowly, as small bands of hunters and gatherers began to settle in one place, as they began to grow their own food instead of always chasing it, something else began to change too. Their teeth began to change. Early humans, living almost entirely on tough meat and fibrous plants, tended to have remarkably strong jaws and remarkably few cavities. But once people began to farm, once bread and grain became the center of the meal, something shifted quietly in their mouths. Grain is soft. Grain sticks to the teeth. Grain, when it sits for even a little while, begins to feed exactly the sort of bacteria that leads to decay. And so, in a strange way, the very invention of farming, one of humanity's greatest achievements, also quietly introduced one of humanity's oldest problems, the slow decay of the tooth from within. Now let's move a little further ahead in time, about 5,000 years ago, to that desert in Egypt where the Nile River flows, where great pyramids were being built, where pharaohs ruled over a kingdom that seemed, to its own people, as eternal as the sun itself. The people of ancient Egypt were remarkably clean. This is something historians always find surprising. They bathed regularly, sometimes more than once a day. They kept their hair neat and styled, and in the heat of the desert, many even shaved their heads and wore wigs instead, simply to stay cool and clean. And yes, they cleaned their teeth too. But how? When archaeologists dug into ancient Egyptian tombs, sealed away for thousands of years, waiting quietly in the dark beneath the sand, they found certain containers holding a kind of powder. This could be called tooth powder. What was this powder made of? Let's explain, slowly, one piece at a time, the way you might slowly stir something in a bowl, watching each ingredient dissolve into the next. First, it contained finely ground powder made from burnt animal hooves. Animal hooves, which were burned over a fire, then ground down into a fine, dark powder. Mixed into this was burnt eggshell. Eggshells too were burned and ground into powder, soft and pale. And then they added pumice, that light, porous volcanic rock that feels rough to the touch. Even today, people use pumice stones to scrub the rough skin on their heels. The Egyptians rubbed this very same stone powder onto their teeth, believing it would leave them clean and bright. Just imagine powdered burnt hooves, powdered burnt eggshell, and powdered rough stone, all mixed together into something like a paste. And they would rub this paste onto their teeth using a finger or a small stick, working it slowly across each tooth, the way we today might work toothpaste across our own. Was this comfortable? Almost certainly not. It was quite abrasive, so abrasive that, if used every single day, it would slowly wear away the outer layer of the teeth, the enamel, the way water slowly wears away stone. That's why, when scientists examined the teeth of ancient Egyptian mummies, unwrapped carefully after thousands of years of silence, they found that many Egyptians had severely worn down teeth. In some cases, the teeth were worn down so much that the softer inner layer, called dentin, was exposed. Strange, isn't it? The very people who were so careful about cleanliness ended up with some of the most damaged teeth in the ancient world. But the most surprising part is still to come. Egyptian bread, their everyday staple food, the food eaten by farmers and pharaohs alike, often contained tiny grains of sand. Because the mills used to grind their flour were made of stone, and small fragments of that stone would break off and mix into the flour without anyone noticing. So every time they ate bread, with every single bite, sand particles rubbed against their teeth. Day after day, year after year, meal after meal, this slowly ground their teeth down, quietly, invisibly, over the course of a lifetime. In other words, the Egyptians were damaging their own teeth just by eating their daily food, and then the powder they used to clean their teeth wore them down even further. In a way, the Egyptians, in their very effort to stay clean, were unknowingly weakening their own teeth. But they had no way of knowing this. For them, this was simply the method, the best method available to them at the time, passed down from mother to daughter, from father to son, unquestioned, the way many of our own habits today go unquestioned. Sometimes mint-like herbs were added to the powder to make the breath smell nice. Because, as we all know, bad breath isn't just a modern problem. It's thousands of years old, and it seems that no matter the century, no one has ever wanted to have it. In fact, among the surviving papyrus scrolls from ancient Egypt, there exists something historians sometimes call the world's first recorded dental prescriptions. Calm, careful instructions written by physicians for treating sore gums, loose teeth, and aching jaws using mixtures of herbs, honey, and various minerals applied gently and left to sit overnight. There is even a papyrus that describes a kind of early dental splint, a way of tying a loose tooth to its neighbor using thin gold wire to hold it steady while it healed. Imagine that thousands of years before modern orthodontics, before braces, before wires and brackets, an Egyptian physician was already using fine gold thread to hold a patient's teeth in place, patient, careful, working entirely by candlelight and instinct. Egyptian society, quite remarkably for its time, also had physicians who specialized specifically in the mouth and teeth, distinct from physicians who treated the eyes or the stomach or the rest of the body. One of the earliest named individuals in all of recorded history connected to a specific profession was an Egyptian man named Hesi-Ra, who lived roughly 5,000 years ago, and who carried the honored title of Chief of Dentists and Physicians, carved carefully into his tomb for anyone in the centuries afterward to read. Just sit with that thought for a moment, that the very first named dentist in the entire written record of human history lived in Egypt, 5,000 years before your own last visit to a dental clinic, before drills, before x-rays, before waiting rooms with soft music playing quietly overhead. Egyptian tomb paintings and surviving pottery also describe treatments for gum disease using honey. A substance we now understand does have mild antibacterial properties of its own, mixed carefully with other natural ingredients and applied gently to sore, inflamed gums, left to sit and soothe overnight, the patient sleeping peacefully, trusting quietly in the slow, patient wisdom of their physician. Even now, thousands of years later, honey is still occasionally studied by modern researchers for its natural wound healing properties, a quiet thread connecting a modern laboratory directly back to a healer working patiently beside the Nile so very long ago. Picture this: an Egyptian woman inside her home takes out a small container of powder, wets her finger, dips it into the powder, and rubs it across her teeth, slowly, carefully. Outside, the desert heat presses in. The Nile flows quietly in the distance, boats drifting past with their sails hanging still in the windless afternoon, and she's simply doing her daily task the way we do today, only the method is different. And that was Egypt's secret, hidden for thousands of years beneath the sand until someone finally thought to dig. Now let's go a little further back and shift away from Egypt toward another ancient civilization, Mesopotamia, known today as Iraq. This is the place where the world's oldest form of writing was invented, cuneiform, pressed into soft clay tablets with a reed, then baked hard in the sun or in fire, preserving thoughts that no one alive today ever expected to survive this long. And remarkably, among these thousands of years old clay tablets, some remedies have been found for toothache. Just imagine, thousands of years ago, some healer, some physician sat down and pressed into wet clay, by hand, a remedy, what to do if someone's tooth was hurting. And these remedies were often quite strange. Strange in a way that feels almost like a story told to frighten children, except it was written in complete seriousness as real medicine by real doctors for real patients. One famous remedy claims that toothache is caused by a worm living inside the tooth. This worm, they believed, lived inside the tooth and hollowed it out from within, causing the pain we now know as a cavity. This belief was so old and spread so widely that it traveled from Mesopotamia all the way to China and all the way to Europe, and people believed it for thousands of years across cultures that never even knew of each other's existence. The idea of the toothworm became so deeply rooted that, to cure it, people used all kinds of strange methods. Sometimes they used smoke, burning the seeds of a plant called henbane and bringing the smoke close to the patient's tooth. They believed the smoke would kill the worm or force it out into the open air. Sometimes they would dig into the tooth with sticks or something like a needle, hoping the worm would somehow come out, wriggling, visible, proof that the pain had a shape and a body. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? Someone poking a needle into your tooth, believing there's a living worm inside. But back then, people had no other explanation. They had no understanding of cavities, of bacteria, of tooth decay as we understand it now. For them, pain meant something living was inside, causing harm. And in a way, this idea was easy for them to understand and accept, because pain, after all, does feel alive, restless, and unwelcome, the way a trapped animal might feel. For cleaning teeth, the people of Mesopotamia also used small sticks, what we might call chew sticks, a small piece of wood, chewed at one end until it became soft and brush-like. Then this was used to rub against the teeth, slowly, methodically, the frayed fibers working their way gently between each tooth. This method was so simple and so effective that it traveled from Mesopotamia across the entire world and remained in use for thousands of years. And as we'll see later, this method is still alive in many parts of the world today, unbroken, unchanged in its essence, even after everything else around it has changed completely. The Babylonians also believed strongly in omens, in signs written into the world by the gods, and even toothache was sometimes read this way. If a person's tooth ached on a particular day of the month, under a particular phase of the moon, physicians consulted long lists passed down through generations of scribes to determine what it meant and what remedy would please the gods enough to lift the suffering. Medicine and religion in this world were never fully separate. A healer reciting a chant over a patient's aching jaw was, in their own understanding, doing exactly the same kind of work as a healer applying a herbal paste. Both were simply different ways of restoring balance to a body that had, for some reason, fallen out of harmony with the world around it. Picture this, in some Babylonian marketplace, dust rising softly in the afternoon light. A merchant sits outside his shop, chewing on a thin stick, softening its end, so he can clean his teeth before the evening prayers or before his family gathers for dinner. Around him, people are passing by. Camels are walking with heavy loads, traders are calling out prices, children are running between the stalls, and he's simply doing his small, everyday task, unnoticed, unremarkable, and yet, thousands of years later, we are still talking about it. Such an ancient world, yet such familiar habits. Now let's take our journey toward India, the land where Ayurveda was born, where herbal wisdom thousands of years old is still alive today, passed down not through machines or factories, but through grandmothers, through fathers, through quiet mornings repeated 1,000,000 times over. In India, for thousands of years, a method has been used that is still practiced today in many villages, in many homes, every single morning, as the sun rises over fields still wet with dew. This is the datten, the chew stick, or tooth twig. A datten is a small, fresh branch, especially from the neem tree, plucked in the morning, chewed at one end until it becomes soft and brush-like. Then it's used, slowly and gently, to clean the teeth and gums, the bitterness of the neem lingering on the tongue in a way that somehow feels cleansing rather than unpleasant. The neem tree has held a special place in Ayurveda for thousands of years. It's even been called the cure for every illness. Neem naturally contains properties that fight bacteria, keep gums healthy, and reduce bad breath. And modern laboratories, centuries later, would confirm what village elders always simply knew from experience. Ancient Ayurvedic texts like the Sushruta Samhita and Karaka Samhita, considered thousands of years old, describe oral hygiene in great, patient detail. They state that first thing in the morning, upon waking, before even speaking to another person, a person should clean their mouth. They even specify which type of wood to use, neem, babel, or a few other trees known for their special properties, each chosen carefully for the season and for the person's own constitution. They also mention that the length and thickness of the datten mattered, that it should be roughly the width of a small finger, and that the datten wasn't just for cleaning teeth, but also for cleaning the tongue, because a coated tongue is also a major cause of bad breath, something ancient physicians understood long before the word bacteria had ever been spoken aloud by anyone. The Sushruta Samhita, remarkably, also describes something we might recognize today as an early form of dental surgery. It mentions the treatment of loose teeth, the careful scraping away of tartar built up along the gum line using small, delicately shaped metal instruments, and even the extraction of badly diseased teeth using specially designed tools, forceps of a sort, shaped and refined over generations of careful practice. Sushruta himself is sometimes called the father of surgery, and among his many contributions, his careful, patient attention to the mouth and its ailments stands out as remarkably advanced for its time, centuries ahead of what most of the rest of the world was practicing. Beyond neem and babel, different regions of the Indian subcontinent developed their own local preferences for the perfect chew stick, depending entirely on whatever grew nearby. In some regions, mango wood was favored. In others, banyan roots or the twigs of the licorice plant valued for their naturally sweet taste, which made the whole experience a little more pleasant, especially for children just learning the habit for the very first time from a patient parent or grandparent sitting quietly beside them each morning. Ayurvedic tradition also placed great importance on the tongue, recommending a separate, gentle scraping tool, often made of copper or silver, drawn slowly across the surface of the tongue each morning to remove the pale coating that gathers there overnight. This single small habit, thousands of years old, is one that modern dentistry has, in recent decades, quietly come back around to recommending once again, having realized, after a great deal of research, that a clean tongue really does meaningfully reduce bad breath and the overall bacteria living inside the mouth, precisely as those ancient physicians had insisted all along, long before anyone had ever looked at bacteria under a microscope. Picture this. One quiet morning, under a village tree whose roots have grown wide and thick over the decades, an elderly man sits, the sun just rising, birds calling softly in the distance, smoke curling gently from a nearby cooking fire, and he chews his datten slowly, peacefully, as if it were a form of prayer, unhurried, present, entirely his own. This method was so effective and so natural that even thousands of years later, it hasn't disappeared. Even today, in many villages across India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal, people use datten every morning. Many say it keeps their teeth stronger, their gums healthier, and it's completely free, requiring nothing but a branch from a tree standing quietly at the edge of a field. It's remarkable. A method thousands of years old, still alive today, even in the age of modern toothpaste and electric toothbrushes and dental clinics with bright fluorescent lights. Now let's continue our journey toward China. In China too, dental hygiene was taken very seriously. Traditional Chinese medicine didn't view teeth simply as tools for eating. It saw them as connected to the health of the entire body, to the flow of energy through every organ, every meridian, every quiet corner of a person's being. The Chinese also used chew sticks, just like in Mesopotamia and India. But China took this a step further. It's believed that about 1,000 years ago, during the Tang Dynasty, the Chinese introduced something new. They created a small wooden handle, and at one end, tightly bound, stiff bristles taken from pig hair, chosen specifically from pigs raised in colder northern regions because their hair grew thicker and stiffer, better suited for scrubbing. This was